Library to speak about the Endangered Archives Programme, Responses to a Pandemic.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Endangered Archives Programme, which is run from the British Library, and then also about what happened to us over the last 2 years and how we responded to the challenges of the pandemic. So just to introduce EAP, as we call it, the Endangered Archives Programme, it's been run from the British Library since 2003, and it's run with funding from the Arcadia Fund, which is a charitable trust of Lisbeth Rousing and Peter Baldwin. And they give the British Library a grant, which some of which we use to run the programme, and the rest we use to send out to projects across the world to engage in digital preservation programmes. So what do we mean by endangered archives? So when we talk about endangerment, we mean a broad definition of any material that's at risk of loss or decay, or political instability, and it must be, according to the terms of the EAP, located in a part of the world where resources are rare or resources are hard to come by for this kind of work, and so that excludes Western Europe and Northern America. Equally, archives, we have a broad definition which refers to materials across written, pictorial and audio, and it is manuscripts, printed books, archival documents, magazines and newspapers, photographs and older sound recordings. One of the stipulations of the programme is now specifically about the age as well, because there's a modern endangered archives programme in UCLA, which started 3 years ago, which deals with kind of material from the mid-20th century onwards. So we tend to deal with material from the mid-20th century backwards, and this goes back as far as 12th century that we have in our collection. So from the 12th to the 20th century, our archives are from this range of dates as well as material. So just a few examples across that broad stretch. We've got manuscripts here from Djenné in Mali, and these are similar to the famous manuscripts in Timbuktu that were preserved in old libraries and then were politically at risk from jihadi incursions into the area and were hidden away in people's homes. And as you can see from the pictures here, we're in various stages of decay. So this project both engaged in a preservation effort and then digitized these materials. And I'll talk to you in a little bit about what happens with the digital images. Another project recently gone online is these slides. These were glass plate negatives, which are very unstable by their very nature and need to be stored in cold conditions in special freezers. And these are in Nepal. So this project from Nepal was a court photographer at the court of the Rana family in Kathmandu Valley. And there's hundreds and hundreds of wonderful pictures like these, which were digitized as part of this project. And then, as an example, one of our popular sound projects is the Xylophone record label recordings from Guinea, which was a post-colonial endeavor by the government of Guinea to record both traditional and popular music. And it's a wonderful selection of recordings which are available on the British Library Sounds website. So how we go about making this happen is we have an annual round in which people apply to the Endangered Archives Programme. And these are people from anywhere in the world that have a project in mind, that may have come across an archive that they think needs digital preservation. As you can see on this little diagram here, they need to link up with a host institution. So it might be their university or another place where they work or somewhere that they've partnered with. And that place will receive the grant from us and administer it. And they also need to partner up with something we call an archival partner, which is an institution in the country of the archive, hopefully kind of close to the archive itself, and they can help with the digitization, and also crucially, they will hold on to any of the digital files that are created by the project. So they don't just come to us at the British Library, they stay in the country with the archival partner. And then perhaps most important, the custodians of the material itself. So the project lead, the person who applies to and leads the project, has to work closely with the custodians, the owners, or the institution which holds the material, to make sure they have kind of fully bought into the project as well. So every year we have applications, we go through them in two stages, a preliminary and a detailed stage, and then the EAP International Panel will assess those applications and will give awards to them. That actually makes it sound a bit simpler than it is, because we're working with such a range of people from different parts of the world with different backgrounds and not necessarily experience in writing grant applications. We tend to work with them quite closely, having calls, what used to be phone calls, now it's usually over Zoom, just trying to help them to kind of hammer a project into shape that will work and will get past the, get approval from the EAP panel, and will turn into a wonderful project. So just a couple examples of literally two of the hundreds of projects that we've had, just to show a range. This is an early project from Bhutan that was the initiative of a Bhutanese monk, Karma Punso. And it's digitization done by the monks of a remote monastery in Bhutan. And as you can see in the picture here, they set up a station to digitize their Buddhist manuscripts in the courtyard of the monastery. And they did this in a region without electricity. So this was a real kind of a bottom-up kind of digitization project, and it was a great success. We've had others from Bhutan with the same team since then as well. And quite a different one here in Indonesia. This was the initiative of the academic Jan van Putten, who was at the University of Singapore at the time. And he got together a local team, and they worked across, I think, 4 different islands in the Riau archipelago, working with individuals holding manuscripts, working with them in their homes, and setting up little digitization stations like the one you can see here, and also carrying out assessment and preservation as required. So as you can see, from these two, that some of our projects come from sort of, you could say, a grassroots sort of setting where the owners themselves may, or a friend of the owners may, see an archive that needs digitization, and others come from academics, from people who are aware of the research importance of the material, but also its kind of endangered state, whether because it's sitting in people's homes, or it's in a building that's not safe, and this kind of thing. So in order that EAP is a kind of fair and not an extractive kind of project, we've got some key principles, and these principles need to be fully known and signed up to by the custodians of the material. So it's one of the duties of the project applicants and project leads that they talk to the owners of the material, and we have to make sure that we've got a form that we give them that they need to take and get signed by the custodians, so that we know that they understand and they give their consent to the way that we use the material. So the principles around the material is that the original material, that is the kind of the physical archive, will stay in the country itself. It doesn't get moved out of the country, unless there's some really pressing reason, but even then it's very rare that would be the case. The digital files that are created are then placed in a suitable institution, what we call the archival partner, as I mentioned, and then secondary copies are sent to us over here at the British Library, where they're archived in the British Library server storage. And then in terms of making things available, the lower resolution versions of those images, JPEG 2000, are made available, and sound recordings as well in WAV format are made available via the British Library website. So we have our own website, which I'll show you in a minute, eap.bl.uk, and what is produced by projects is made freely available via this EAP website. So again, the custodians and owners of the material must understand this and agree with it in order for a project to go ahead. And then finally, neither EAP or the British Library, we promise that we won't use the material for any kind of commercial gain. And if there's any profit to be had from these images, it absolutely must be the profit that goes back to the custodians, not to us. And so that we often get approached by commercial digital companies asking to use images, and often we have to say no, because they would put them behind a paywall and use them for profit. So this is something that we have to stick very closely to, and it is something that we are, as much as we are able, we make sure that the profits from the material are not sort of going to other people and not to the custodians. So this is a detail from the EAP website itself, and you can see it shows 3 projects here. So all of the digital material is arranged on the website according to the EAP project which it came from. And I think this is important because it really keeps the coherence of that material. And while you can look at things from across different projects, you can also see the kind of logic of the individual collections that have been digitized through EAP projects. And you can also see down side here how the project allows filters to look at specific types of material. There's also ones for countries and languages and so on. So it's a very searchable digital archive. And all the material is also catalogued in the British Library's IAMS Archives and Manuscripts catalogue, and is available on the browsing facility of the British Library's Archives and Manuscripts website. So this is just one example of one collection, and you can see the structure here. And from here, you can go over to the digital images as well. And the digital images are made available on the British Library's Universal Viewer software, which is a IIIF compliant viewer. And this allows the images and the metadata to be displayed and to be reused as well, as long as it's for non-commercial purposes. And as you can see, a good degree of zooming into specific manuscript images is possible. So now here's a slide which is, I just did this the other day actually, because I was interested in trying to work out the whole sort of process by which EAP projects go towards a kind of an archive and the EAP website itself. So on the far left here, you've got the project, and the project creates digital images or recordings, as well as catalogue data. Now, both of these go to the local archive in the country, the archival partner, where they're held in perpetuity. The images also go to the British Library's archive, as I mentioned, and the catalogue data goes into the British Library's catalogue. Now, those images in the British Library's archive, which are in TIFF format or WAV format for sound, are also repurposed into the Amazon Web Services cloud, and they're transformed into JP2 or JPEG 2000 format for that. And that cloud then serves the images to the EAP website. And at the same time, the catalogue data from the British Library's catalogue through an OAI PMH pipeline also goes to the website. And these two together then form the what I was just showing you, the images and the metadata that we make freely available via the website. So again, it looks kind of complicated, but I think it's actually a relatively seamless process, although it does have a lot of dependencies, and I'll get onto in a moment, briefly, the pandemic and how that affected our processes. So when back in late March 2020, when the lockdowns came into place, and all of us sort of struggled to transitioning to working from home, we started to think about what we were going to say to EAP projects that were currently working out there across the world in various situations, at various stages of their project. Some of them might only have just recently started, other ones were nearly finishing. And so in mid-April, we sent out this email, or this is the beginning of it, to all of these projects. And the main thing that we wanted to stress to everybody was not to try and keep working just to sort of hit the deadlines of their project, which they'd agreed with us, but to be safe in the first instance. The other thing we wanted to say was that if they could work safely, then they're absolutely encouraged to do that. So some of them might have finished all of that field digitization work and just be working on their catalog data. So it might well be possible for them to, like the rest of us, to transition to working from home and to finish their projects in that way. And quite a few of them did that in the coming months. And initially, we also offered everyone a 3-month no-cost extension, which we also extended in the coming months with places that then subsequently went into lockdown, like India. And 6 months after that, we wrote all of our projects again and just tried to assess across the world how they were doing, what the sort of situation was for them, whether they'd changed their plans, and then specifically if people had been furloughed, if they'd had extra charges, that kind of thing. And this was very interesting. We collated all this information, and different parts of the world had been affected in different ways. At the time, those working in, for example, Mongolia had barely been affected by the pandemic and just continued as usual. Whereas India, where it came in slightly later than Europe, had heavy lockdown and furloughed staff and a lot of kind of financial implications for projects in that part of the world. And then we also had to make a decision about our funding round. So we were in the middle of a funding round where we'd invited people who put in their preliminary applications to send us detailed applications. And we spoke to Arcadia, the funder of the Endangered Archives Programme, who also funds other programs like the Endangered Languages documentation programme. And everybody was trying to work out what the best way of doing things was. The Endangered Languages Programme actually cancelled their round completely. The Modern Endangered Archives Programme just continued their round, in fact. We decided to postpone our round. So we wrote to everybody and said, we're sorry, we can't do this year, but we'll hold on to your applications. If you want to carry on and be in the round next year, just let us know. So a lot of people did that, and they made some adjustments next year and applied again. And a lot of those now are up and running as projects. Again, 6 months after that initial email to applicants, we asked them to give us a risk assessment and look at specifically how things had changed in terms of travel restrictions, accessing the original archives, accessing the host institution's facilities, if that was sort of digitization equipment and things like that, and also financial members and team members becoming ill, which certainly did happen in quite a few cases. So that risk assessment then has become a kind of integral part of actually the Endangered Archives Programme process. So now we are asking in our current round everybody to do a risk assessment with these kind of things in mind at each stage. So finally, one of the kind of, as Adi was saying, and as a lot of institutions have experienced, a kind of positive side of the pandemic was an increase in online participation. So for us, as you can see here, the page views went up in March of 2020, and then up again through June and July. There's a dip here in the summer, but they continue to go up in 2020 and 21. So that's the kind of increase, which has actually brought its own challenges, because we found website slowdowns happening and had to upgrade to a new version of our platform, Acquia. So they offer a subscription, and we had to buy more bandwidth with them, basically. So it did increase our costs, but the main thing is more people were were viewing the images online. And we track that with analytics. Chris, am I about to run out of time?
5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes. Okay. So we track this with analytics, and also one of the positive things that we've seen is a increase in users on the website from different parts of the world. So while in earlier stages of EAP we had the sort of obvious usual kind of suspects for our highest number of users in UK, USA, and Europe. But over recent years, it's become more mixed. Now, India is the largest country, followed by the USA and UK, but then Nigeria and Indonesia. And as you can see, yes, Armenia, Brazil, Ethiopia, before you get to Canada, Peru, and Nepal. And you may notice just from some of the projects I've shown that actually these correspond quite well with the EAP projects that are online. So what we have is a lot of projects in Indonesia and a lot of people in Indonesia coming on to look at the projects. Similarly for India, similarly for a small country like Armenia, in fact, which maybe out of this list has the smallest population, but is pretty high on the list of users. And yes, also Ethiopia and Peru and so on. So, and another thing that just this year we've done actually is tracking the users for specific projects. So we've been able to actually confirm this. So a project based in Ghana, for example, would have the most users from Ghana, followed by Nigeria, and then maybe the UK. So we can really track quite closely the engagement across the world with these digital materials. And finally, we also track this on social media. So the EAP has its own Twitter account, and that tweets out about new collections going online and kind of highlights key items. And sometimes this gets picked up elsewhere in the world, in other languages and in other countries. So just two examples here. One is a project in Peru that got a lot of attention. And we do find actually that in these cases, while our EAP Twitter account is relatively popular, it's certainly not on the range of anything beyond a few hundred retweets. Whereas these ones in the language of the country often have many hundreds of retweets and seem to have even more kind of pickup than ours. So it's really nice to see this as well when we can just notice on Twitter our stuff getting retweeted outside of the Anglophone world. And the one just down here on the other side is a Georgian project. So to conclude, I think one of the positive things I've been trying to highlight just at the end here about the digital engagement, not just in Western countries, but in the countries of the projects themselves, is also increasingly mirrored in the applications that we're getting. So there's a knock-on effect. I don't think they're kind of unrelated, that we are getting more applications from the country in which the archive is located. So rather than a kind of research project model where you have an academic in Cambridge or Harvard who's applying to do something in Mali or Ghana, you have really somebody in the country itself who either is associated with the collection or is a university there and knows about a local collection in danger, will apply to EAP. And so we have this kind of, now I think in the last round, we've just had a preliminary round and almost 3/4 of the applications have been from within the country itself. I think there's actually another thing going on here, which is that because travel is more difficult, it's more realistic if you're based in the country to run an EAP program. But we're really seeing, although EAP is run from the British Library, the pandemic has actually allowed us to become even more sort of properly representative across the world than we were before. And we keep learning, and we keep adjusting our processes. But I think things are, there are, as I've been trying to say, positive outcomes from the last 2 years, as well as the difficulties that we've faced. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sam, for that really interesting talk about all the projects that EAP are helping to save and digitally preserve. Eleanor, are there any questions in the chat or Q&A?
There's one question in the chat, actually, but I'm afraid I can't read Korean, so I can't see your name. But the question is, what will the owners of the manuscripts get after the project? Maybe some result from copyright or financial gains?
So yeah, as I mentioned, we make the images available on a non-commercial basis. So where there is copyright, that's really only material that's from the late 19th or early 20th century onwards. We put things out on a Creative Commons non-commercial, which is a CC by NC license. And that means it can be reused freely, but not for commercial purposes. So when people come to us and they do want to use this material for commercial purposes, even for like in a glossy coffee table book, we need to put them back in touch with the custodians of the material, and they can then set their own terms. Whether it's copyright or if out of copyright material, they can decide how they want to approach this. So in that sense, it's quite a lot of work for our project curator, Jody, when people come to us asking to do this, because we have to, often quite old projects, find out who or where the custodians can be contacted. But certainly the idea is that that any commercial requests like that go back to the custodian. So we don't always sort of track what happens after we put people in touch with them, but hopefully they will, if they wish to, see some kind of benefit out of the reuse of the material.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any other questions or comments?
There's nothing in the Q&A or in the chat. Oh, there's one thing popped up in the Q&A.
Oh, Gillian.
Cesar asks, or unless you want to speak, asks, does this not create problems in the case that items are still in copyright? I'm thinking of works that where the author rather than the custodian is still alive.
Yes, so that's one of the things that we work with the applicant to work out. So, and it's also one of the reasons why we are quite happy to put a sort of cutoff point of the mid-20th century for material. So we tend to have material that's out of copyright, but where it would be copyright of an author rather than the custodian. That's something that we've tried to make the project applicant aware of that, and that they know what they're doing. And we also do have a takedown, what's the word? Well, we have a page on our website anyway that says if there's material that's in copyright, that policy, if we have material that's in copyright and you think it should be made available here, then please get in touch with us and we will take it down. In fact, copyright has been less of a problem than other kinds of sensitivities. So people whose grandparents, say, may be represented in images or archives and don't feel that that's they'd like that to be publicly available. So that's more the kind of thing that the takedown policy addresses.
Thank you. Gillian, did you want to ask anything?
Yes, just quickly. Very encouraging, I'm sure it must be for you, seeing the uptick in the number of people applying from the countries in which the archives are located, rather than via Harvard or the usual suspects. And you mentioned at the beginning of the talk how much work you put into supporting applicants to, speak the language of applications. Are you seeing sort of repeat lead applicants, where someone in a country has got some expertise thanks to your coaching and has the confidence to apply again, you know, helping other archives, or is it different people every time?
Yes, that's a good question. We do have repeat applicants. In fact, it's quite a pattern with EAP that we tend to see. Often the same people will come back several times, and in a way, it's a mixed thing really, because in a way, as you say, it does indicate that people have gained that kind of skill and are confident to do it. And we've had projects that we've given people, say, 3 projects. I think usually we draw the line there, but they've really then developed over those 3 small projects quite a good collection of digitized preserved material. One thing that we're trying to do at the moment for the first time is to look into regional hubs where we'd identify people and institutions that have been involved in quite a few projects, and run some webinars and training programs to get them to sort of reach out a bit and to encourage other people in the area to apply. So yes, it's something that's a good question, and something we are very aware of. And it's both a positive and a negative, I think, when we see people coming back again and again.
Thank you. I think we'll want to, if there's no more, are there any more questions? Because if not, I think we'll take another break until 3:10 for the next speaker. Sam, thank you once again for your presentation. And if any of you have any further questions or want to discuss